Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. So I've had the C8Z now for a little bit over a month and a half. I've put almost 1,500 miles on it, and I've thoroughly been enjoying it, man. I've really been trying to drive it because, you know, GM recommends that you put 1,500 miles on the car before you take it to the track. You know, so I did the first 500 miles for the engine braking, and then I immediately did an oil change, and then I did a transmission external filter and the flush procedure as well. Okay, so in today's video I'm going to give you my 1 month review of the C8Z, what I like, what I don't like, what I think about it so far on the street. I haven't gotten into the track, so this is going to be street only, and then my thought versus the C7 Z06. And with that comes one of the first things and one of my favorite things about this car, the startup. Now this is in stealth, okay? And I keep it in stealth because that's also a negative about the car. The startup is so loud, guys. When you have it in normal mode, this is still pretty loud, and this is in stealth. Inside, some of the house is shaking and stuff like that. So I'm a person that, you know, I wake up pretty early, I go to work pretty early. So for me to take, you know, my fun cars to work, you know, I used to basically roll the car out of the driveway in neutral. But that brings me to my first thing that I didn't know, and it's actually pretty surprising. But you can't put this car into neutral without the engine on. So the engine has to be on for you to put the car into neutral. So, I mean, you know, I never thought about a situation like that, but yeah, I used to literally in the morning, 5 a.m. or something like that before work, if I wanted to take the C7, I would just put it into neutral, open the garage, roll the car out, and then at the end of the driveway, I would start it, right? So, you know, so that's a positive of the car, is that the startup is amazing, okay, even in stealth mode. But the problem with that is also that even though, you know, I love it, my family does it, my neighbors really don't. You know, I've had several neighbors already comment on it, saying, hey man, that car is super loud, you know, would you mind not turning it on at 5 in the morning? So that's been a little bit of a bummer in that sense. Okay, you can't put the car into neutral, can't roll it out to the end of the driveway. Startup is amazing, sounds super cool, but you know, only us car guys get it. So the family and the neighbors have gotten annoyed about that. Now, my neighbors across the street are doing a bunch of construction, so there's a bunch of cars here. And this brings me to another thing about this car. It is very difficult to see around the backside and like behind you and to the sides of this car. Forward visibility is amazing, way better than the C7, okay? But man, I thought the C7 had some blind spots, and this thing has some crazy, like if you look this way, like there's nothing, you can't see it. There's just wall there, okay? On the exterior, it looks like there's a little window right here, but there isn't. So I don't know what the thought process there was, or why would they even put that little panel there? It's like a fake window. It literally looks like a window, but it's really not. Another thing is with the glass right here in between the engine bay and you know, the cabin. Like when you look like this at a glance, the glass has like some reflections, and those reflections like freak me out all the time. I think that there's a car there or something like that, because you know, you used to just kind of peeking that way to see your blind spot, or you know, your back window, whatever. But in this car, you have this glass. It's taking some time to get used to, okay? It freaks me out still sometimes. On the highway, I'm constantly looking and stuff like that, doing this. So I would had appreciated to have this car with the blind spot monitoring system. That is one thing that I do wish I had from like the higher levels. Since this is a base model, it comes with none of that. I do have the electronic camera mirror, so that is great. So visibility straight back is great. When the car is cold, it feels a little clunky, to be honest. The engine feels a little clunky. It's almost as if it really wants you to warm it up until it feels smooth. And I don't know if that's a combination, if that's a transmission thing or an engine thing. I mean, it's definitely a very high strong engine, so it probably has some big ass cams, you know. So yeah, I'm not sure what causes that. And it's not bad. It's not like it has a bad tune. I'm not saying that. yeah, it just kind of feels a little clunky. It doesn't feel as smooth as other modern OEM cars. You know what I mean? Like my wife has a Lincoln, I have a GMC. You know, you jump on those kind of cars, you just kind of go whether it's cold or not, and it feels pretty smooth. This car is not like that. You know, this car definitely lets you know that you're in something special. Now, I do have to tell you guys, I do believe that this is a much better street car than the C7. Okay, the C7 is great, and you could totally daily drive it. You could totally street it. I'm not saying it's a bad car. I love that car. But a big thing with the manual C7, at least with the manual, with my C7, it wasn't really enjoyable for me to drive around town. The gearing is so long, and it has so much power that is almost effortlessly to drive it. And that could be a good thing, and that could be a bad thing. You know, when I jump in my fun cars, I want to roll through the gears. You know, I want to enjoy some of the speed and stuff like that. But in that car, unfortunately, first and second gear are basically useless on the street. You know, if you ever breathe on it too hard, you know, you're spinning the wheels. You know, and there's traffic and stuff like that. You know, that's not right. That's not safe. Besides that, I mean, the electronics, obviously the infotainment on this car are much better. Every time that I get into the car, I'm an Apple user. Every time I get into the car, Apple CarPlay connects right away. The sound system, even though this is a base car, and my C7 was also a base car, this sound system is a little bit better. I'm not gonna say that it's, you know, out of this world, but it is definitely better. It has better sound quality. The C7 had like too much bass almost, and it was hard to get it to not have too much bass. So it was either like too much bass or too much treble kind of thing, you know. That was also a Bose. This says Bose, but you know, I don't know. So yeah, this sounds okay. It sounds decent. You know what I mean? Good enough for me, you know, for a car that I'm mostly gonna track. Now the transmission is another thing. I mean, you know, obviously the C7 it was a manual, you know, and I do love manuals and stuff like that. But around town, you know, Florida is not like we have canyon roads and stuff like that around here. Most of the stuff in Florida is pretty straight, to be honest with you. We have big, even like inner city roads can be pretty big. Right now I'm in a 3-lane road, which is 3 lanes going one way and another 3 lanes going the other way, and sometimes it is even 4 lanes for turning lanes. And that's not that abnormal down here, you know. But they just, you know, like this road just goes east to west. This goes all the way to the beach and all the way basically to the Everglades, and that's it, you know. So there's really not a lot of excitement and stuff like that in South Florida to drive around the streets. You know, we have, you know, if you want to be a hoonigan and go on ramps and stuff like that, but that's about it, guys. You know what I mean? It's really not much out here to enjoy rolling through gears and stuff like that. And because the C7 has so much power, so much torque down low, and the gears are so long, you know, it's hard to enjoy a manual C7, you know, at least for me it was, you know. So even though I'm not like a DCT, you know, fanatic, you know, I have been enjoying driving this more on the street. I find that this is much easier to just jump on it. Right now I'm in sport mode. I can hear the exhaust a little bit. It's an automatic, and I just kind of drive, you know what I mean? And if I want to be with the wife or I gotta receive a call, you know, I'll put it on tour or on stealth, you know, and everything quiets down, it shifts, you know, it makes you, it's more of a normal car, you know, as far as, you know, yeah, just jumping on it and just driving, you know what I mean? So another thing about the transmission is, so far on the street, and like on the intro video, you know, I did some launches and stuff like that. I have gone wide open throttle on the car. It already has almost 1,500 miles. But the transmission hasn't done that weird thing where it kind of feels like an automatic sometimes on an upshift that I felt on Rafi's car when I drove his car on track at Homestead. So far, this car hasn't done that, so I'm not sure if it was just something with that car or something to do more with track driving, you know. I did I did some digging around and stuff like that, and I have heard some other people mention it, that some soft upshifts, and it seems like GM did it on purpose. I guess they thought that maybe if you had a certain amount of steering angle or throttle input, or I don't know, some kind of parameters like that on track, and you got an aggressive upshift, then that could upset the chassis. So that's still kind of TBD. But so far on the street, transmission has been super sharp. I let a couple of my friends drive it. They also said, hey, you know, one of my friends that has a 991.1 GT3, he really thought that the downside of the car, he was going to be really let down with the transmission. And even he said it, the transmission's great. He, you know, we launched it, we did wide open throttle, and, you know, so yeah, I right now on the street, and from what I've experienced so far, I can't fault the transmission. Definitely not a manual. I would rather have a manual, but as far as DCTs and DCTs that I've experienced, which haven't been many, to be honest with you, I've experienced the Evo 10 DCT and a BMW, and have driven a couple of my friends' Porsches and stuff like that. That's really about it. So not super extensive, but you know, I'm just saying, so far I've been happy with the transmission. You know, when it's an auto, and you put it on, you know, like right now we're on my mode, which is everything is soft, or on tour, it shifts, you know, not as smooth as an automatic. You definitely feel like it is a dual clutch, and if you put it in sport or track or Z mode or whatever, they're super sharp, super fast, very snappy. What I was expecting of the dual clutch, so I am very happy about that. Okay, we'll see how it does on track, but on the street, I have no problems with it. Now, driving around in manual, it is actually pretty enjoyable. I'm not gonna lie, I enjoy driving around in manual. You know, I feel like you can play this engine like some kind of instrument, and then the downshifts are just the best part about it. That's like the highlight. The highest highlight for me is that the downshifts with this transmission. You know, and yeah, like I said, it feels like you can play the engine like an instrument. It does feel though that GM handicapped the car with the gearing past like fifth gear. I don't know. Yeah, it feels like 1, 2, 3, and 4 are properly spaced, but if you throw it in fifth, it almost feels like you threw an anchor. Not really. Not. Maybe that's exaggerating. That's like an Evo quote. But yeah, it definitely doesn't accelerate as strong as you would expect in fifth gear. So that's really surprising. There's no reason why fifth should be so far spaced out from fourth, and honestly even sixth. You know, like there's 8 gears in this transmission. There's really no reason to have 3 overdrives, or 4 if you want to consider fifth gear an overdrive. I feel like with 8 gears, I would expect that 1 through 6 would be much closer together, and 1 through 4 are pretty good, but then for some reason, then yeah, like I said, fifth gear just goes on forever, man, and doesn't feel, the car doesn't have that much torque to pull it through that long of a gear. Okay, and that brings me to the engine and the power and the delivery and all that. Even though this engine doesn't have as much torque as the LT4, as the C7 Z06. Let me take this little turn over here. On the lower gears, because its gears so closed, it doesn't feel slow, and it doesn't feel like it doesn't have torque. Like, it definitely pulls really good. Really good. It pulls very strong, very fast, all the way to red line. Like, I hit red line there in a second, and it happens very fast. The car is fast. It feels, to me, it feels a little bit faster than my C7, just not as crazy, right? Because the torque in the C7 is just like boom, like it just shoves you, and then it just shocks the car, it blows the tires. So that part, if you're into that, you know, that is exciting. That can be very exciting. You leave freaking, you know, black marks all over town if you're just peeling off everywhere. You know what I mean? This will kind of get a little squirrely in first gear if you turn everything off and you just kind of mash it. But yeah, it doesn't feel like it's lacking torque at all to me. You know what I mean? It's definitely different. You know what I mean? And if you're thinking that you're gonna get, you know, the same kind of shove as the C7Z, then yeah, this doesn't have that. Okay, the C7Z, you know, even going into fifth, you know, you can feel the nose kind of diving down from the cutting the power, and then as soon as you go back on the power, it kind of does one of these. So the torque on those cars is definitely incredible. It's a lot of torque. But this has a lot of power, and then it pulls extremely well. Once you're in the power band, it pulls extremely well. Below 3,000, it does feel kind of doggish, but it's doggish compared to itself, okay? It just pulls so hard. Once you're in the power, once you're in the real power band from like 4,000 on, it just pulls very fast, very hard. Below that, you know, it just kind of feels like you're off VTEC. You know, that's another thing that it kind of reminds me of. If you gun it at like 2,000, it's like, and then all of a sudden it feels like you just jump on VTEC, and then all of a sudden it pulls much harder. So I so far I'm very happy with the power delivery. I'm very happy with the engine. Very happy with the sound. I know not everybody is like in love with the sound. I think I think some people maybe had expectations that it was gonna be more, you know, but this is a stock car, guys. You know what I mean? It has cats, passes emissions in 2025. You know, you can make it super quiet. So I mean, you know, you kind of have to realize that, you know, this is not a Formula One car. You know what I mean? I see everybody online saying, oh, you know, I want it to sound like an F1 car. Let's be real, guys. This only revs to 8,600. You know what I mean? Cars from that era were 15,000. You know, so this is not going to sound like an F1 car. You know what I mean? But for a stock car, I love it. I think it sounds great. I don't see what the problem is. This sounds super exotic, and this is exactly what I was talking about on the intro. The noise from behind you and all the experience, the exhaust, especially the downshifts, that gives you that exotic, you know, feeling about it, you know. It's fast. It's crazy fast. It's too fast for the street. Oh, there goes my water bottle. Now let's put this back in tour and let's just chill for a little bit. So, you know, that's another facet of this car, right? With the looks and how loud it is. That the exhaust is incredibly loud for a stock car, man. You know, this car attracts a lot of attention. Now, I will say there is quite a few of them around where I live. Okay, I've seen more C8 Stingrays. Stingrays are everywhere. I mean, they're like ubiquitous, and they're like, you know, around here they're like kind of Camrys. C8Zs not as much. Okay, but definitely way more C8Zs than C7Zs. But because the car is so loud, it's a bright orange car, man. And then now some recent laws that were passed in Florida. Now, if you get caught going 50 over the speed limit in Florida, you can go to jail, you know. So it's not as, you kind of feel like you really gotta be on your A game if you're gonna play around with this car on the street. You know what I mean? Because you can hear this car coming a mile away, and obviously you can see it's a big bright orange car. So, you know, this is definitely not the car if you're trying to be stealthy. You know, it's great that you can put it in quiet mode and quiet it down. You know what I mean? But yeah, it can definitely attract some unwanted attention, if you know what I mean. Now, as far as the interior, I touched on the infotainment and stuff like that. I do like the infotainment. I think they did a really good job. I don't like the font on it as much. But honestly, because I use, I'm an Apple user, it goes it goes straight into Apple CarPlay, and you know, it looks fine. It looks great. It works great. You know, I've had no problems with it. I've had no problems, you know, calling on Siri. You just hold the speech button, you just hold it down, and that brings up Siri. Sorry. I love the digital dash. You know, the C7 has like a half digital dash. You have analog instruments on the left and on the right. That was cool too, but I do actually like the digital screen. I like that you can change it and stuff like that. I really like that you can make it however you want in my mode and in Z mode. So you can, in both those, you can change the default display. You can change like what it what it displays on the little pods on the side. You could also change what it shows on the heads-up display. I really like the heads-up display. I think it's much better than the C7. The C7 was also a color display, but this one is a little bit more crisp, more vibrant. The shift lights on it, not that they're very bright, but they are brighter than on the C7. On the C7, they kind of get washed away. I feel like there's a little bit more room here versus a C7 in the driver's seating area. The passenger side feels really weird. I did sit in the passenger side, and with this big wall of buttons, it feels really weird. There's really nothing to grab, so I feel bad for passengers and stuff like that, especially on track, man. You just basically have to just kind of just cross your arms and just hold on to the seat belt. There's really nothing to grab. There's no grab handle. There's no hole to grab on the door card or anything like that. So, I mean, that is what it is. So I definitely still had the same sentiment of the wall of buttons. I think it's a bit too much. I can see why GM is doing the update and they're getting rid of this wall, and they're putting all these controls underneath the infotainment. The steering wheel, I still think it's stupid. I don't hate it as much anymore. I've gotten used to it, but yeah, it's still kind of silly. Now, I drove Josh's car, which I'm hoping to be able to do a review. So he bought a Stingray, C8 Stingray, and he has the Alcantara wheel, and I do like his wheel a little bit better. For some reason, it doesn't feel as square with the Alcantara. So I may be doing something with the steering wheel in the future. Now, one thing that I definitely do not like about this interior are these like chrome or matte chrome, but they're not really matte, because I don't know if you can tell, but right now the one over here on my left, the sun hits it and it shines directly on your eyes. Like, why would you have to put like this bright aluminum thing in a car? And there's some chrome details around. The paddles are chrome. Some of the vessels inside the buttons are chrome. So I definitely don't like that. I don't like the reflections that I get from the stupid aluminum on the horizontal lines on the dash that are aluminum. And I don't like the chrome accents inside the buttons. If I didn't have this aluminum that reflected in my eyes, I don't think it would bother me as much. But the fact that it just, several times during the day, depending on where the sun is, it's either this side that reflects right on my eyes or right underneath the infotainment that shines right on my eyes, and I hate that. Another thing that I don't like as much are these AC vents. These linear AC vents, it never feels like it's blowing like the way you want it. Like the one over here on the left side of the steering wheel, it's either blowing directly on your hand or blowing at like your leg or your knee or something like that. Like, that vent is kind of silly. So most of the time I just have it venting up, okay? But the one over here, also by the center console underneath the infotainment screen, it's very similar. It's a much longer one. But for it to be blowing on you, if you have your hand on the steering wheel at the 3 o'clock position, this is constantly blowing on your hand, Now, on the brakes, speaking of brakes, gotta let the pedestrian by. So I have a GMC, I have a 2023 GMC Sierra 1500. And that truck has a very similar brake setup to this car, where it has an electronic booster. There's a mechanical connection in between the pedal and the master cylinder, but it's electronically boosted. So they can modify and they can change the pedal feel via the booster. On the street, I haven't had any problems with the brakes. The reason why I mentioned the truck is because I'm very used to the brakes on the truck. They feel normal. There is no pedal feel, okay? You feel like you're pushing on something. You're definitely pushing it, and you feel that, okay? But there's really no like feedback through the pedal. So that part sucks, but I knew that going in. There's a lot of pedal travel. Not where it feels like the brakes need to be serviced or bled or anything like that. No, but there's just more travel than you would expect in a performance car, okay, before starting to bite. And I also don't like that like the feel changes with the settings of the car. So once I take it to the track, I may find what I like the best on track, and maybe I'll just try to lock it in that. I don't know if you can lock it in all the modes. This car has so many freaking adjustments. I'm still kind of working my way through it and learning it all. But hopefully there's a way that you can just lock the brake feel in one setting for everything, and that's it, you know what I mean? And just kind of work with it, and just work with what the system is, you know what I mean? Now, I am going to be changing these seats, well, at least the driver's side, okay? But I have to say, this base seat is more comfortable than the C7 seats. This is like total sofa spec, I can see you driving this for a long, long time and not get super, super beat up. Now, the last thing that I'll touch on a C8 versus C7, the trunk area on the C7 is way more usable, guys. Way more usable, okay? The front and the trunk, people say that the trunk get hot. Man, both of them get hot. The front and the trunk get hot on this car. So I don't think it's something that, like, I wouldn't go grocery shopping in this car, but if you had to daily this car, yeah, they both get hot. There's all kinds of coolers and stuff like that in the front, and in the back, the whole area is above the exhaust. So yeah, they both get hot. So the trunk, unless you're a golf player, I don't know what you're really putting there. Yeah, you can fit stuff there, but yeah, it's kind of silly, you know what I mean? Like, I could have had this car without the trunk and just the front. It would have been fine, okay? But in the C7 and C6, and they just have a cavernous, with the hatch and everything like that. I was able to put one time I put a table saw back there. I've put wheels and tires. I've loaded everything that I needed for a track day, including spare tools and a toolbox and everything like that. I even put a tent in the back of this is with all the stuff for the track, a tent, a chair, a toolbox, a jack, all kinds of stuff in the back of the C7, no problem. In this car, I guess if you want to play Tetris, you may be able to get a lot of stuff in there, you know what I mean? But it's definitely not as practical, So that definitely goes to the C7. All right, guys, well, stay tuned for the next video. We're going to start modding this thing right away. Peace out.